Legal research and writing is really critical in any serious case. The reason it matters, and you're going to want to know what your lawyer is giving to the judge, is because it's the judge who is going to make decisions that are going to impact your case in your life. So oftentimes lawyers are asked to give arguments in court, and you think about, if you think on TV, there's people standing up in front of a judge. But what really happens, in addition to the oral arguments in front of the court, lawyers spend a lot of time at their desks or maybe at a library or on the internet doing legal research, using different legal tools to come up with support for their cases and their arguments. They take a look at what they're trying to accomplish for a client, what are the facts, and then what law supports the client's position and can further that. And it's really important, I think, to have a strong presence when it comes to your written product, because I know, because I was a law clerk, that judges rely on people like law clerks and their own lawyers to look at those briefs. And so you want to show up really strong on the judge's desk when it comes time for their lawyer to have a conversation with the judge about what should actually happen. When the judge is taking a look and studying the issues and talking with maybe their law clerk or their lawyer about what should happen in a case, you want to make sure that what you have in front of the judge on their desk is strong and is supported in the law so that the judge can follow what your lawyer said should happen and can trust it. It's super important, in my opinion, to see what your lawyer is offering to the court, because it makes a difference for your case. If I'm you, I want to know what you're saying about me in my case, and so why wouldn't you? So I think, for anyone, I recommend that you ask to see a copy of written pleadings and written submissions to the court so that you can be informed and know exactly the position you're taking and the arguments that are supporting it, so that you can have a better understanding of your own case and even talk with your lawyer about it. I'm thinking of a case a number of years back. It was a very serious drunk driving accident where, unfortunately, one woman was killed and her husband was seriously injured. But there was a problem with the investigation, how the police handled the evidence and mishandled it under the law. And our client had been charged after some illegal steps in the investigation to gather certain evidence. And so what we did was we briefed the issues, we set up our motions, had hearings about it, and ultimately the judge took a look at what we were arguing and, of course, what the prosecution was arguing, but our brief carried the day. And ultimately the judge just decided that, the prosecution couldn't proceed with the evidence that was gathered against our client because the investigation itself was flawed, and that wasn't fair, and under the Constitution wasn't right. So in that case, our client got a very unusual outcome as a result of strong briefing. There is a lot to go into being a lawyer for somebody, and oftentimes it can feel super frustrating when all you see is somebody's coming to court and not a lot is happening. I think there is a perception that lawyers aren't doing anything, and then that's really frustrating. The way I like to handle it is that there's got to be communication about what's happening, right? There's always things going on in the background, whether a client knows about it or not, but to kind of help with that perception or help the understanding of a case is just to talk about it. So, when we get a file at the beginning, it's always nice to know kind of the overview and where's the case possibly going and what does the process look like. I think that's super helpful. But, each step of the process, at least in criminal court, criminal state court, is a little bit different, and there's not a lot necessarily that can be accomplished at a first hearing that you might want to have accomplished maybe later in the process. I was with a client today who was very interested in challenging some pieces of evidence that were gathered, but it was a first appearance, and so the expectation of the judge and the prosecutor is that you're handling this very limited one or two issues, when you got to look 2 steps down the road before you can file motions and then get into court the right way to actually get to the meat and potatoes of a case. And so it's just a matter of, I think, kind of explaining and understanding that there's other things going on, and then to ask good questions. If you have a case, ask your lawyer so that you can feel informed about what they're doing for you and your case. So one of the things that is really important in a case is to have strengths in all the important positions, kind of like on a team. You've got the quarterback, right, who's going to throw the ball, and I'm not a sports person, but then there's the guy that catches and someone runs it down the field, and it all takes a team. You got blockers and everyone else, right? So for us, we've got a team of lawyers, and then we have wonderful support staff, and we all work in our own ways to help a client's case. One case that I'm thinking of right now, where I've sat in kind of the research and writing role, and not the face of the case, is one we have going in Wisconsin presently. And we've got a situation where we have a really strong face on the case. We've got a really strong courtroom presence. Ryan does a really good job presenting at trial and everything else. But some of the challenges in the case have been the complexity of the charges, the complexity of the rules of evidence, the complexity of things like, the joinder rules versus severance in this case. And there's just a lot of charges, and kind of untangling and understanding kind of what's going to be in and out of bounds in a different state has taken a lot of legwork. And so there's a ton of behind the scenes work that I've been involved with, advocating our client's strongest position. And we've got briefs out to a judge there right now that we're waiting to see kind of where those go. But it's essential to have all of the important roles covered so that a client is best protected in those situations. When people are looking for an attorney, I think, at least if there's kind of no prior experience with criminal justice, I think it can be really daunting trying to figure out like who's a good lawyer and who's not a good lawyer. There is a ton of attorney marketing out there, and big, huge firms that crank out a lot of content for kind of lawyers to get their ratings up. And all of that is well and good, and it's not a criticism whatsoever. But it's, I think, really hard as a consumer to know, like, well, what's what? Like in a lot of areas, it's just hard to know, like, what are you actually looking for? So when I talk to potential clients, I'm always, I always say you got to be educated, right? Just like anything, be an educated consumer. You have to make sure that your lawyer has a good reputation, so do your diligence on that. You got to make sure you feel good with your lawyer. You got to feel like this is somebody you can have a collaborative effort with, and someone who you can talk to and trust. You got to feel like you can be confident in what they're doing in the courtroom, what they do when it comes to the court record. That means things like making sure cases are well briefed if they need it, make sure that you're showing up and you're not sloppy in the courtroom. All of those things, and how they present and communicate, is important. So every law firm is different, all lawyers are different, but those are kind of some of the areas that usually when I'm talking to a potential client and they have concerns, I just say, get educated, make a lot of phone calls, and eventually, you got to find the right fit for you, and just be confident that you're going with the right team for your case.